I'm one of those preachers that preach in series. That means I take one topic and I spend weeks on it. Why? Because some topics are just so big. I want to start a brand new series that'll run for the next 4 weeks that's titled, Do We Care? One of the prominent themes in the Bible is the theme of compassion and caring. And I want us to open our Bibles to Matthew chapter 25, because there we're going to unpack some of the things that Jesus talks about. Let me ask you some questions. Does God expect us to care about people, even people that we don't know? If so, how do we demonstrate this care? What responsibility do we have to care for people beyond sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ with them? Does God even care about transforming society? And are we given the option of turning away from the world's problems? Does God allow that? Does He give us a pass? Isn't the salvation of our souls enough? Does God expect more from us? Jesus, in this passage, he's in front of an audience, and then he gets really deep with them by saying, let me tell you what's going to be like at the end of the age when I return or my second coming. He said, I'm going to bring all the nations together, and I'm going to separate them into two groups. Like a farmer or a herdsman or a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And by the way, sheep and goat, in some instances, they look similar, but they're very different in their temperament. Sheep, they are very dependent on their shepherd. Goats are very independent. Sheep have a herding instinct. They feel best when they're in a group or a flock. Goats are very curious and they wander everywhere. Very different. Jesus says, on my right will be the sheep. In this instance, it's the good group. On my left will be the goats. And now he's going to talk strictly to the sheep. Matthew 25, verse 34 says, then the king will say to those on his right, that's the sheep, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you do, or whatever you did, rather, for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Let's stop there. In your private time, I want you to read the rest of the chapter so you can see what Jesus says to the goats. I've been serving the Lord for 40 years, and I can tell you one thing that I've seen that's common, or something that God has done consistently over the years, is this. He's never allowed me to settle at any particular juncture of growth to make me think I've arrived. He's constantly prodding, prompting, encouraging, challenging me to continuously grow, to become more and more like Jesus in my attitudes, my actions, and even in my aspirations. And I believe He's doing the same for you. And so the goal of growing to be more like Jesus, it actually forces us to wrestle with this question, do we care? And to really answer that question, we need to ask an earlier question, so to speak, to the conversation of care, and that is, what does it mean to care? What does it really mean? Jesus is giving us a definition that's implied in the text. He's saying, care is to take action to meet the felt needs of those who he defines as the least among us. So caring is not merely an idea, it's not a philosophical position, it's not a check-the-box response to some moral question. Care, it's about taking action to meet the felt needs of people that can't meet those needs by themselves. In fact, let me bring back those verses to you of verse 35, which says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Jesus was affirming his followers not based on how much of the Bible they had memorized, not based upon how frequently they go to church. He wasn't even affirming them on how vigorously they worshiped. He wasn't even affirming them on their level of giving, though all those things I just listed are very important and are essential to the Christian faith, but that was not Jesus's points of commendation. Rather, he was commending them because they were meeting the needs of those who were food insecure. Jesus said, "I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink." I don't know if any of us in this room or those watching online can say that, "Pastor, I know what it's like to be hungry." Very few of us, including myself, can't attest to that. I know we saw in our announcements that in a couple of weeks we're giving out some 40,000 pounds of food at our Montclair campus, here in our Rockaway campus. But we must ask ourselves the question, is that enough? I'm not just talking about the amount that day, but do we really care about the food insecurity, even in New Jersey? According to the Community Food Bank of New Jersey, some 650,000 people in our state, or 7.4% of the population, are food insecure. Approximately 9% of children, or 175,000 kids in New Jersey, experience food insecurity, which translates to having dramatic effects of suffering, not only physically, but also in their mental health. It is amazing how Jesus, he didn't associate or identify with the individuals who had a full belly. He identified with the person that had hunger pangs and didn't know where their next meal was coming from. And so when we ask ourselves the question, do we care? Jesus extended the idea of what it means to care when he says to care is to take action towards welcoming strangers. Now, strangers is in that text is not what you and I may describe as a stranger today. A stranger today we would think is someone who looks weird, who's sketchy, who you stay away from. That's not what that word means. Not in the Greek text. That word means this person is not one of your family members. This person is a foreigner. This person is an immigrant. This person is one who causes you surprise and wonder because he doesn't look like you. She doesn't look like you. And Jesus said, I was a stranger, and you took me in. In other words, he was thanking his followers for opening their lives to him. even though he didn't look like them. I remember a couple of years ago, after the 9 o'clock service, I was leaving the sanctuary. I was walking to the pastoral suite just to catch our breath, ready myself for the next service. And I saw this gentleman in the hallway. He was walking pretty fast and hastily walking towards me. So I stopped. And you can look at him and see all of the social markers: ethnicity, racial, the complexion of his face, hair texture. You can tell he was from one of the South American countries. And when he came closer and he started to talk, his face quivered a little, his voice choked up. And you can tell he's about to say something. He's very emotional. And when he spoke, you can hear his accent. That was thick. And he said, "Pastor," he said, "my family and I, Christchurch is our home. We're undocumented immigrants, and we're very afraid of filling out forms and all of that, and even in a formalized way go through the membership class, because we're a bit afraid because of our immigration status. But we're serving kinds of people. We want to serve. And every time we've tried to get involved in serving, there's always this roadblock that we're asked, 'Are you members?' And so we've not gotten a chance to serve. But Pastor, I want to appeal to you because you're an immigrant also. And you know how we feel. The moment he said that, though it was 50 years ago I came into the country, I came all the way back to when I was 8 years old, just got off a plane, first time on a plane, landed in JFK Airport. I felt like a child again. Everything is big and foreign and different. And I felt so lost. I couldn't understand people when they spoke, because though it was the same English, they spoke so fast, and their accent was so different. And I knew how he felt. I said, I'll take care of it. And we adjusted a lot of our requirements so that we're welcoming of the stranger. We still have more room to go. But Jesus was associating himself with this individual, because what it means to be a stranger is that it means that you have this deep sense that you want to be welcomed, you want to belong, and to feel as if you don't belong and you're unwelcomed. It does something inside of you. Mother Teresa once said, being unwanted, unloved, uncared for, forgotten by everybody, I think that is a much greater hunger, a much greater poverty than the person who has nothing to eat. See, Jesus was telling those who had instinctively fed the hungry, welcomed the stranger, clothed those who lacked clothing, visited the prisoner, cared for the sick. But Jesus was saying that you were engaged in meeting the vital needs of others. You are engaged in safeguarding human dignity of the poor. You weren't giving handouts, but it's like that popular cliche, you were giving a hand up. It is amazing, though, that when you read the text, that Jesus, he's identifying himself with the marginalized, with the outcast, with the sick, with the afflicted, with the oppressed. He's identifying with the powerless. And we would have thought that he would be identifying with the strong. Several years ago, right before COVID hit, I was able to check off one of the boxes on my bucket list. I always wanted to go on a safari in Africa. And I was doing some leadership training in Uganda. And at the end, my team and I were able to go to Kenya and go to the Masai Mara, the western part of that state, to go on a safari. I want you to picture in your mind's eye. You're in a big Jeep. There are no windows. There's no roof. And our driver, now the animals are in their natural habitat. This is not great adventure. It's not that. The host warned us. He said, don't put your hand out of the Jeep, your head out of the Jeep, or your legs out of the Jeep, because when you do, the lions will realize that you're small. And they'll have lunch. And so I kept my hand, my neck in, my legs in. He said, because when you're in the Jeep, they think you are the Jeep and you're big. So I was big when we went through that safari. And we're on this dirt road because it's been frequently traveled. It's not paved, it's just dirt because that's where the safari vehicles travel. We got to this dirt road, and all of a sudden, this herd of giraffes were there, like 20, 30 giraffes. And they were just taking their time and crossing from one side of the road to the other. And all of a sudden, this huge giraffe, the biggest one in the herd, about 18, 19 feet tall. I didn't measure him. But he stood in front of the Jeep and wouldn't move. He just stood there. And I'm thinking, what's wrong? Doesn't this giraffe know that, hey, we're big? He wouldn't move. So I asked the host, I said, why is he not moving? He said he's standing there to protect the rest of the herd, to make sure all the small ones can walk across the road safely. Even in the animal kingdom, instinctively, they understand the meaning of care. So when we ask ourselves the question, do we care? Jesus is answering it by telling us the meaning of that word. It's to take action to break dangerous patterns of behavior and cycles of poverty. It's to try to help, thwart and dismantle injustice so that every person can realize God's dream for their lives. So do we care? I can't answer that question until I ask this question. Why have some stopped caring? We're living in a culture where it's almost attractive to have apathy. It's almost as if the feelings of indifference looks like a garment that should be, on the catwalk when models are modeling the garments that's trendy and it's for the season. Feelings of indifference, it's so vogue, it's so popular, it's so normative. The crazy thing is that some people sit idly by and they'll whip out their cell phone and they'll videotape some moral crime, some ethical malpractice, some injustice, some violence taking place, and they'll sit there, videotape it, and then post it on social media. And the reason why they post it is not to decry the wrong. It's to boost their social following. On Tuesday, June 25th, 2014, a young mother was attacked brutally by one of her co-workers behind the very restaurant where they worked. They worked at McDonald's. Over some alleged gossip, the one co-worker just pummeled Catherine Ferrari, broke her nose, kicked her, giving her a concussion, 2 black eyes, numerous cuts and bruises, while 12 adults filmed it. The only person that came to Catherine's rescue was her 2-year-old little boy, her 2-year-old son, named Xavier Ortiz. With his little fist, he's trying to fight to help protect his mother, while all the adults videotaped it and posted on social media. Why have some stopped caring? Rollo May, an American psychologist, said, hate is not the opposite of love. Apathy is. How do you avoid the pitfalls to caring, which produces apathy? How do you get to that place? You got to guard your heart, because it's the wellspring of compassion. And if you're not careful, things can get lodged in your heart, and then it produces apathy. One of those things is cynicism. Cynicism, it's a sarcastic, jaded, cynical, skeptical perspective. And you know what makes it dangerous? Oftentimes the cynics are right. Their perspectives accurate, but their conclusions destructive and inaccurate. If you don't protect your heart, you can find yourself being jaded and being cynical. And that'll produce apathy, and you'll find yourself not caring any longer and unable to fulfill the very calling that Jesus placed on all of our shoulders, to care for the oppressed and the marginalized, the weak, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to help minister to the sick, to visit those in prison, to be able to bind up the wounds, so to speak, of the brokenhearted, to facilitate justice and social justice. You know, another danger point is codependency. Codependency is the formation of this imbalanced relationship. It's where our actions, though well-intentioned, produces this self-destructive behavior in others. And it perpetuates their addiction. It feeds their self-destructive behavior. It causes them to have sometimes poor mental health. It causes them to, at times, it stymies their growth and continues an immature cycle. And so when we see you helping someone, and they then think that they can keep living in their dysfunction, like when our government bails out a certain group and they're not taking responsibility to work or to work hard or to pull themselves up and to make adjustments, it produces this issue of codependency. And when we see that, we just back off and say, I don't want anything to do with caring. So you got to guard against that. Some have stopped caring for the poor because of that. Some have experienced also compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue, it's a psychological term. It describes the condition of emotional and physical exhaustion that leads to the inability to empathize, to listen, to care, to feel compassion for others. It's almost, we're so used to seeing human depravity, it doesn't move us. It's very dangerous. And the thing about it is that it can happen to anybody if we're not careful. A couple of years ago, my wife and I were driving through Manhattan, and I grew up in the city. And I'm a pastor, she's a pastor. And I saw something for the first time I've never seen before in my life. There was a homeless man sitting on the sidewalk, and he had a sign that he held up, and he had a can he had his legs crossed, he's sitting there. And he had the sign up and the can there to drop money in. And the sign gave you instructions. It says, curse me out for $10. And I'm sitting there, I said, Marlinda, look at that. We both looked and we were just aghast. We were shocked. I mean, she's a Jersey girl, but I'm a New York guy. I'm shocked. She's shocked. I knew she would be shocked, but I'm shocked. And so what the guy is saying, in essence, is that, look, you're experiencing a lot of stress, indifference. You're going through hard times. Come and just in a cathartic way, just drop all the expletives on me. I can take it. But when you finish, put $10 in the can. And I came home, and before service, we were meeting with the pastors in the pastoral suite, and we're getting ready to pray. And I told the pastors what was going on, and I said that in Montclair. And one of the pastors, bivocationally, he's a banker, and so he worked in the city for years. And I said, what happened? And he said, $10? He yelled. I'm thinking, my God, this guy's really empathetic. He said, it used to be $5. I mean, so he's moved, and you can see the ideas that, this whole thing of compassion fatigue, we're in a caring profession, but if you're not careful, you can stop caring. Because it's so easy for that to happen. Hebrews 13, verse 16 warns us. We will show mercy to the poor and not miss an opportunity to do acts of kindness for others. For these are the true sacrifices that delight God's heart. It can easily happen to any of us that we stop caring. I was coming through Newark Airport. I was at baggage claim to collect my bags. This woman walks up to me, and she's probably about in her 70s. Looks like a grandma type. And she said, sir, can you help me? I said, what's up? What's wrong? You can tell by her accent. She's Jamaican. My countryman. And she said, I just came from Jamaica, and they won't let me exchange my monies because the Jamaican currency doesn't have enough strength with the American dollars. Can you give me some money? So I said, let's walk over to the exchange place. The moment I started moving towards it, she said, oh, no, forget it. It was a scam. And so it's amazing. When I was walking out the door, a police officer, he was looking at the whole thing, and he's watching me. And he said, sir, you did the right thing. This woman's here every day scamming people. And you can so easily get to the place where you can say, I don't want to be bothered with anybody. In fact, one of the other things that causes apathy is being a careaholic. A made-up word by psychologists to describe a particular symptom. In fact, psychology today defines a careaholic as someone who has a strong need to be needed and uses caring and helping in the same way alcoholics use alcohol to self-medicate pain and cope with stress. So sometimes when you find someone that they're always caring, they end up giving away all of their funds to their own detriment. Why? It's not because they have some big heart of compassion. It's because they are so confused about the idea of caring that they need another fix. So when they express care, it's to deal with their own soul that is in pain. And sometimes when we've seen all those things, you may have grown up in a home where you had parents that just gave away the store, and you did all those, and you saw that, and now you said, time out. Pastor David, I'm going to be gone for the next 3 weeks while you talk about care. And I'm going to say, Jesus doesn't let any of us off the hook. What he calls all of us to do is to be able to pick ourselves up and to recognize that apathy is not a method in which we can live out our Christian lives. The Bible shatters and destroys that kind of thinking. It's antithetical to every aspect of the Christian faith. I'm so glad scholar and author Brian Griffiths, in his book, Morality and the Marketplace, he challenges us with these words. Obedience to Christ demands change. The world becomes his world. The poor, the weak, and the suffering are men, women, and children created in his image. Injustice is an affront to his creation. Despair, indifference, and aimlessness are replaced by hope, responsibility, and purpose. And above all, selfishness is transformed to love. So I want us to understand the value that the Christian faith doesn't say it's good enough for you to come to know Christ as Savior. We all need to do that. In fact, at the end of my talk today, many of you are going to make a decision to give your heart to Jesus. And I welcome that, and I welcome you. I invite you to be a follower of Jesus. But Jesus doesn't stop his call in our lives at the door of salvation. After you pass through the door of salvation, you have to become the eyes and the arms and the hands and the feet of Jesus in how you live out your life. Your life must be robust with the fact that you saw me, I was hungry, and you gave me food. You saw me, I was naked, and you gave me clothing. You saw me, I was sick, and you ministered to me. You saw me as a stranger, and you welcomed me in. You saw me as a prisoner, and you gave me words of comfort and affirmation. I want you to see that God calls each of us to say, coming to know Christ as Savior, it's not the end of the road, it's the beginning of the road. That's the gospel. And if you try to separate the salvific work of grace, I had to put that $10 word in to let you know I went to school. If you have to put and separate the salvific work of grace to think that I just must preach salvation by grace through faith, then I'm saying to you that's inadequate. It's not the full gospel. The full gospel says we're saved by grace through faith, and we have works that authenticate our salvation in grace. It must include that for it to be the New Testament gospel. I know I've not answered the big question yet, do we care? I just asked preliminary questions. What does care mean? Why have some stopped caring? But I now come to ask this question: how can we care responsibly? No one wants to be taken advantage of when you attempt to provide care for another. And Jesus has called us to care responsibly. Let me bring you back to his words, looking at verse 35. When I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. And when I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me. And when I was naked, you gave me clothes to wear. When I was sick, you took care of me. And when I was in jail, you visited me. Then the ones who pleased the Lord will ask, when did we give you something to eat or drink? When did we welcome you as a stranger or give you clothes to wear or visit you while you were sick or in jail? The king will answer, whenever you did it for any of my people, no matter how unimportant they seemed, you did it for me. I want to give you a 4-point process to care responsibly when you deal with the marginalized, the poor, the under-resourced, the victimized. You got to go through this process. It's an ethic of care to help combat apathy and walk out the gospel. The starting point is caring about. Caring about is when this is grounded in the common humanity of loving people. It's when it bothers you that people are hungry. There's injustice. There's inequity. Caring about is when you empathize with the pain of others, their victimization, their difficulty. You haven't done anything yet, but it's on your radar. You genuinely feel for that person or you feel for that group. There's these warm, good feelings inside that all are synonymous with empathy. But it doesn't convey action yet. But it starts there in caring about. They're on your radar. Then it must move then to when you care for. To care for is when you roll up your sleeves and you then begin to put into action your feelings of compassion, your feelings of empathy. It's when you look to ease the burden of the other. The care for the other. You not only see them, but you see them in their humanity and their need, and you're willing to do something. I love what the Zulu people say when they greet one another. Those from South Africa, they use the Zulu word, sawubona. And sawubona, it's a word that means, I see you. But it's not like you and me when we say it. It means I see you in all of your strengths and your weaknesses and your experiences and your person and your humanity. I see you in your desires and your dreams. So when I see you, I regard you, I respect you. So when you say sawubona, it's more than just, hey, it's more than that. It's a caring for. And caring for is when you love your neighbors, you love yourself. But it doesn't stop there when you're caring responsibly. It moves into caregiving. Caregiving requires competence. It requires skill building and training. For example, I mentioned in a couple of weeks we're giving out some 40,000 pounds of food. That's caring for, but that's not caregiving. Caregiving is when you're willing to say, let me talk to individuals who deal with the food insecurity and find out best methods, best practices. Let me go get trained. Let me spend some time reading books and having conversations with people that are hungry and go through those experiences. Let me help them and let me understand the best way. And so, see, caregiving requires competence. It requires the development of skills so you can be able to be more effective and more strategic and more impactful in your compassionate service. Then you move not only from caring about, caring for, caregiving, to care responsibly means that there must be care receiving. Care receiving is when you poll those who are receiving care from you to find out if they really feel cared for. It's where you start inviting dialogue, the focus group. Do you feel cared for by me? And by the way, husbands, I encourage you, ask your wife, how do I rate on the husband scale? And then flip the question and ask the wife, you ask me now, how do you rate on the wife meter? Moms, ask your kids, kids, how am I doing as a mom? Dads, I encourage you to ask the question to your children, how am I doing as a dad? Singles, ask the question of some married people. How am I doing in my singleness? See, the idea is that to care responsibly, to care about, to care for, caregiving, care receiving, when you tally up those four components that underpin the ethic of care, it equals care. And when you do that, you find yourself growing in the art of caring responsibly. I end with what our 26th President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt, once said. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Let me tell you, all the degrees you have, all the letters behind your name, all the money you have in the bank, all the gifts that you have means very little to someone until they know how much you care. I'm on a journey, and I'm inviting you to go on this journey with me. God's doing something in my heart tied to Matthew 25, verse 35 through 40, and it's messing me up. And He's calling me to do something really, 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 really big. And I can't do it unless He messes you up too and invites you to come alongside of me so together we can do something really, really, really big. So come along on this journey.